My theme for today's talk is about no technique, no teachers. Speaking of Dharma transmission and becoming a teacher, I want to appreciate these themes, technique and teachers. Mostly teachers, but a little bit about technique. So, to start with, that was like a perfectly coordinated coughs that you did. It was pitch perfect and perfectly timed. Yeah, resonance is nice. So I want to talk about technique a little bit to start with. Sometimes we can get caught up in technique when we talk about meditation and zazen, that we think there's a certain way to do it, and we do it well, or we're not doing it well, or there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And our minds are just really wired this way, to think in this way. And sometimes, when we talk about Zen, it does have a strict form to it. So it kind of feeds into our natural tendency to focus on the technique. We think there's a technique that'll get us where we want to go, right? Drop our attachments, become wiser, become more awakened, reduce suffering for ourselves, and the technique is the way to do it. That's not the case at all. All the techniques, all the forms that we have in Zen practice were discovered through trial and error of people living into a process of inquiry. And they discovered that certain things allowed them to learn, open up, expand in certain ways, and maybe work better than other ways. So what we have in the way of our forms is really the legacy of thousands of years of trial and error, of people doing these practices, trying them in certain ways, having them work for many people, having them not work probably for many people, who must, then are called to find their own forms from all the wisdom traditions that we have, from all of the experiments that we've had, millions of people over millennia, how to study ourselves, how to forget ourselves, and how to wake up to our true selves, which is what we're here to do in our Zen practice. It all comes from people's experience, and it has to come from your experience, not from I'm going to follow the technique and that's going to get me there, but to enter into it with what is happening right now as I follow this form. Right now, it's a continual investigation. So there's no doing it badly. The fundamental technique that we're working with is our attention, you could say. So it's the direction of our attention, the depth of our attention, and the quality of our attention. That's the fundamental thing. So you can apply this at any moment of your day, of your life. Any moment. Where is your attention directed? What is the quality and what is the depth? And then what is getting in the way of those things? And what you can do with those. Okay, that's the fundamental thing. Is there any technique to that? Not so much. Okay. Where are you putting your attention? What is the quality? What is the depth? How do you deepen the quality? How do you deepen the depth? How do you maintain the direction that you want? Okay, that's the primary technique we have here. So you can apply it anywhere. We can get a little heady and say, well, I have to do sitting meditation, and then I have to sit in a certain form, and my back needs to be a certain way, my knees to be a certain way, back, all of this. That's setting up obstacles for yourself. All of that setting up obstacles for yourself. At any moment. The technique is simply to pay attention with quality and depth to whatever is going on with you, your mind, and your body, and your emotions. So you have to make your practice your own in this way. Okay. Engage and commit to and be consistent with a sadhana, right? A practice routine that includes practice, a meditation practice, and a study practice, and then a community practice. That you're able to really pour your heart into, put your life force into. Engage in that. That's the technique. That's it. And you find what works for you. Make it yours. Okay. I think most of you kind of know this, so I'm just reinforcing this part, I hope. I was talking with Miyoku about this yesterday, and she's finding the same thing. Just the importance of finding ourselves from our lived experience, not from what anybody else tells you is the way things are. Right? Even something like the acupunctures and the meridians in Chinese acupuncture, those lines. It's like, where did those come from? We have now, it could be a very technical practice to like learn where the meridians are and what you're supposed to do with them and all of that. I think there's a Bible of that. This is how it is. But those were discovered through sensitivity to people's own bodies. Right? It was through observation, not through study. Through observation. Right? Nobody cut out bodies and found the meridians. I mean, I don't even now, like, with our modern ways of sensing into the body, I'm not sure we can see the meridians. Does anybody know? Because have those been picked up with certain MRIs or anything? Yeah, don't know. And yet, there's a lot of evidence that those are very real. Right? So, generations and generations of people who have found it within themselves. That's it. We're not studying the technique as something from outside. It's always to discover it within yourself. What's going on? What the organic system of your body mind, how it's operating. Okay. So don't get attached to technique. And don't get attached to teachers. And don't get attached to students. Don't get attached, most importantly, to your ideas of what a teacher is and your idea of what a student is. That's the next part here. So there's actually a lot of koans in our koan tradition that deal with authority, that deal with teachers, that deal with taking things on authority, and respecting authority and not respecting authority, or overly respecting authority, or under-respecting authority, and finding your own authority. So it's a very strong theme in many of our koans. And actually, the koan system itself, as I was preparing for this talk, I realized the koan system itself challenges our idea about being a teacher and being a student. Right? As many of you know, all of you know, I can see with the smiles and the nods, because it kind of sets up this dynamic where you're like passing a test. Right? The teacher's got the answer, and they're going to pass you on it. And it's the structure of it. Okay? So it brings up a lot about authority and about, that teacher being on the high seat and the student being subordinate, and now the student needs to pass the test, if you will, and the teacher is the arbiter of that. Well, it's not quite like that. So in this way, the koan system itself is a koan. Working how to work with koans, not from this place of, oh, you're the teacher, you have the answer, I got to figure out the answer so you can pass me, which is not how it is, but really discovering how it is itself a koan. And many of you are along the path of exploring that koan. Here's my favorite case from the entire curriculum about teachers, Zen teachers. Book of Equanimity, case 53, Obaku's dregs. Attention! Obaku addressed the assembly, saying, all of you, without exception, are eaters of wine dregs, going on pilgrimage here and there. When will there ever be a day for you? Or another translation says, where will you have today? Don't you know there are no Zen teachers in all of Tang, China? At that time, a monk who was there stepped forward and said, what about those everywhere who have disciples and lead assemblies? Like you. And Obaku remarked, I don't say there's no Zen, just that there are no teachers. Okay. Zen's a thing, but there's no teachers of Zen. So I want to explore this koan and some of the background of it, and some of the dimensions of it. Obaku he had a very direct way of teaching. He was very imposing. He apparently had this big knot on his forehead that came from bowing so much, and he'd hit his head and I think he had a real kind of brusque kind of face. So he was really imposing. And he was always really coming strongly, at people, challenging them. Once a student asked him on another occasion, what is the way and how must it be followed? Obaku said, what sort of thing do you suppose the way is, that you wish to follow it? The student's asking for an idea. Yeah, he says, okay, tell me about the way. Describe it to me so that I can follow it. So I can follow the technique, perhaps. And Obaku just, you're looking for an idea. But Obaku snatches away all ideas. Then the student says, what instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the Dharma? So now it's like, yeah, what about technique? Instructions on meditation. Obaku said, words are used to attract the dull of wit and are not to be relied upon. Snatches it right away. You're looking for words, you're looking for technique. Okay, it's not there. The student doesn't give up. And he said, if those teachings are meant for the dull-witted, I've yet to hear what Dharma has been taught for those of high capacity. Well, I'm not dull-witted, so tell me something for the non-dull-witted. Very persistent, right? And then Obaku replied, if you're really of high capacity, where could you find a teacher to follow? He just keeps pulling it away. Just like, right? What are you looking for? What are you looking for? You're looking for something outside of yourself. To be the authority, to be the way, to be the technique. Ubaku's always turning the person's light back on themselves. What are you looking for? And I love the final exchange here. He concludes it with a very clear instruction. Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people who act like mad dogs, barking at everything that moves, not even distinguishing between the wind that moves among the grass and the wind in the trees. That last line is really subtle. But I want to go to the first part, which is awesome. Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Maybe we can all do this right now. Just take a moment and avert your gaze. Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Reality as it is, right here. Nothing to understand, nothing to control. Nothing to produce, nothing to eliminate. If you're like me, a lot of my mental activity is really engaged with thoughts of producing and eliminating. Creating something, creating a condition, creating art, creating a change, or eliminating something, eliminating a condition, eliminating a feeling, eliminating something that I think is bad or unpleasant or that I don't want. It's a certain relationship with this reality right now. The void in front of our eyes is reality. And this is reality. Okay. And the void is an emptiness in our conceptual understanding of emptiness, like nothingness. It is the fullness of everything, just as it is. And the interconnectedness and the interdependence of everything, just as it is. In perpetual creation. The void is actually prior to the dimension of creation. So it's from the womb, you could say, from which creation rises. So, here it is, the ever-present womb. How can you produce or eliminate it? Observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. Okay. So it's such a beautiful, radical, teaching, and he goes right there from this inquiry about teachers and teaching Zen and our relationship to teachers and teaching Zen. I'll say a few more, relate a few more comments about this koan that come from the tradition. So Hakuin actually lived over 1,000 years, or almost 1,000 years after Obaku, and this encounter and Obaku's teachings had come down through the Zen tradition. And Hakuin said, this statement of Obaku's is poison on the water. Whoever drinks it dies. I misunderstood this for 20 years, so don't take it lightly. This saying is hard to penetrate. It's in the same mold as, quote, he still has habit-ridden consciousness. It's a subtle saying. The path of language ends. Yeah, it's poison on the water. Whoever drinks it dies. We all have ideas about teacher and student. We all do. You know, this is important to recognize. You know, you do have an idea about teacher and student. I would invite you to not pretend that you don't. You most likely do. So investigate that. And if you do, and if you take this poisonous statement, there are no teachers of Zen, then what will die will be your idea of yourself as a teacher or a student, or both, or neither, whatever the idea is. That self will die. So that's Zen for you. And then Hakuin himself misunderstood it for 20 years. You know, Hakuin had actually a very, very, I would say, almost of a tumultuous relationship with teachers. You know, if you read his memoirs, you know, Wild Ivy, it's collected in a book called Wild Ivy. He had a lot of judgment around certain teachers, and you know, positive and then negative towards other teachers, and he had a lot of judgment towards certain students and other students. So I take it that this came later in his life, you know, probably in his 50s would be my guess, when he really, you know, saw that you can mistake this to mean that, you know, there's no teachers. I'm not sure exactly how he misunderstood it, to be honest. I'm not sure exactly, but I would imagine, imagine that it has to do with his critique, perhaps, of other teachers and how they operated. And then maybe he came to see that he initially thought it meant, you know, oh, Zen can't be taught at all. So to be a Zen teacher was something about, you know, not quite in integrity, maybe, to make yourself out to be a Zen teacher, something like that. I'm speculating. But then he came to see the subtlety of it, because we can say that someone was acting as a Zen teacher. We'll get to that in a second. But I like this, how Hakuin says, the path of language ends. Okay, so that means that to me, the concepts of teacher and student are what need to end. Path of language ends. He's really, really pointing at, Obaku is pointing at our concepts about teacher and student and our attachment to those concepts. That's the nut of the issue here. And those concepts of teacher and student have to be totally abandoned. Right? Those are attachments, those are identifications. Now, Tenkei, in his commentary, points out how, well, if you're going to say that the words of a teacher are dregs, right? That's the dregs that Obaku talks about. You're all drinkers of wine dregs. It's like you're pouring out all the good stuff, which is the real juice, the wine of the Dharma, which points us back to ourselves, and you're just taking the dregs, which are the teacher's words. Like that's the thing. But Tenkei, he says, well, Everywhere they say that people who consume writings and sayings are gobblers of dregs. But Daiei explained that if writings are dregs, then the oak tree in the yard and 3 pounds of flax, which are famous in sayings, well, those are dregs. So it can't be seen as limited to writings and sayings. From the perspective of the Zen eye, even practice is gobbling dregs. Even travel for study is gobbling dregs. Going on pilgrimage is gobbling dregs. Even talk about doing meditation or reading scripture is all involvement in writings and sayings. Therefore, even to speak of enlightenment and delusion, views of Buddha or views of Dharma, is all gobbling dregs. Yeah. Could be. Could be. It's all in how you take it, I think. It's all in how you take it. Right? If you take these things with a certain kind of mind of authority, and it's outside of yourself, then it's dregs. But if you take it in a spirit of curiosity, of encouragement, of could be, let me try this. What did that mean? How do I respond to this? Episodes and incidents in the school of life that this earth realm is. Could be true. Okay? To me, that's the wine. But don't get attached to your ideas. But what any of it means, especially enlightenment and delusion, oh my God. Especially meditation and practice. Oh my God. Especially being a teacher and being a student. My teacher, Shishin Roshi, he has commentary on this in his collection of the Book of Equanimity. On this koan, he says, a teacher is like a mirror, encouraging you to trust yourself at the deepest levels possible. This is where he now starts to say, well, okay, so you don't get attached to your ideas of teacher, but then yet there is something there. What is there? What is here? A teacher is like a mirror, encouraging you to trust yourself at the deepest levels possible. To work at the profound level where you're not holding back requires unconditional commitment. A good teacher can see where you are holding on. If a teacher challenges you, see what comes up and let that process you, rather than the other way around. So I like this. Yeah, I like this. I definitely encourages you to trust yourself at the deepest level possible. That resonates with me as my aspiration for how I work with you, is to encourage you to trust yourself at the deepest level possible. That's what I aspire to do. And then to help you do that. Help you find that within yourself. A good teacher can see where you are holding on. Yeah, sometimes. And then he says, if a teacher challenges you, see what comes up and let that process is you rather than the other way around. So that's it too. Whatever the teacher presents, see what that brings up in you, and let that process you. And actually, you use that with everybody in your life, actually. So then everybody can be your teacher by working that way, by presenting something that allows something to come up with you, and that becomes an opportunity for self-study. Let that situation process you. But then I'll also say that all of these concepts that I just said, that I kind of echoed and amplified from Shishin's, don't let those become concepts either. A mirror. Oh, the teacher's the mirror. Okay, then I'm going to look for myself in the teacher, as a mirror. Oh, okay, as soon as you do that, you could be getting into trouble. What if you think the teacher is always challenging you, or the teacher challenges you? Well, then what happens when the teacher doesn't challenge you? Say, oh, a good teacher is supposed to challenge me. Across the Zen tradition, the teachers I've known, the teachers I've studied, some of them challenge their students more than others, directly. You may say, oh, well, that teacher who challenges their students is a better teacher than that teacher who doesn't challenge their students. Or I need a teacher who challenges me directly versus a teacher who doesn't challenge me directly. Now you're just caught up with your own ideas about teacher and student. You know, on the spectrum of challenging students, I'm probably on the lighter side. I'm probably directly challenged less. That's my way. That can be challenging to some people who want to be challenged more. So, can they work with me? Or are they going to go find a teacher who challenges them? I won't say what's better, but I'll say, I'm a koan for you, as they should be. And you're koans for me, as you should be. Every single one of you is a koan for me. Maybe even a mirror, you know. Maybe I don't reflect back to you. Maybe I'm like, at one point I'm a really cloudy mirror. I can say, do you think this is going on within you? And you're like, no, I don't. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm a poor mirror. Could be. So anyway. So, yeah. Zen has the benefit, I think, of really having this teacher-student relationship be really prominent and activated as a primary modality in our practice. You know, a lot of different spiritual traditions have their own teacher-student forms that they have. But Zen brings this right in to the practice as a key part of the practice, which I benefited from as you know. I saw my teacher in Dokusan 4 times a week for 20 years. So that was something of like the engine, you know, of my practice. And the form offers that, and our center offers that too, in that kind of formal relationship. So I was able to like really work through all the layers and the subtleties of my attachments and ideas about teacher-student, and I had a teacher who had done the same and was doing it with me. So that's how I operate with you. Then you can find the layers and the different expressions and the appropriate expressions. You know, there are times when it's appropriate for a student to bow to their teacher. There's a form of dokusan, of coming in and offering respect, and then facing, you know, the judgment of the bell to say the dokusan's over, it's time for you to leave. That's a certain relationship that gets actualized in that way. There's a great potency to it, but it doesn't say anything about who we are as people or what, you know, any depth of wisdom that I have that you don't have. It's just I've traveled a certain path and followed a certain process and, you know, learned about myself in a certain way that you aspire to learn about yourself at the deepest level. So there's this term that came up to me as I was preparing this talk that, you know, has come up sometimes. It's the spiritual friend. And people say, well, they're not, you know, there's no teachers, but there's spiritual friends. And I kind of I kind of like it, but I kind of think it might be missing a little something. Just for me and the way I look at teachers and students. You know, ultimately, I think, yes, we are all walking each other home. Yes, we're all bodhisattvas, and we're functioning within circumstances in certain relations, host and guest, teacher and student. Yeah. So I think at the deepest, most profound level, yeah, we're all spiritual friends. Yeah, I like that. About, I think it was like 20 years ago, and maybe it was 25 years ago, the internet was just coming up, and people were putting out websites and creating phone apps and things like that. So I guess we're talking about 20 years ago. And my career was in technology, so I had this idea for a website that I wanted to create, and it was going to be called ifiknewthen.com. ifiknewthen.com. And it was going to be a site where anybody could come, and it would just have a form for you to put in two things. Well, a few things. First, it would just collect your age, number one, and then maybe a little additional demographic information, like your gender and your, maybe that was it. Maybe that's all. Okay, your gender and your age. And then the question would be, what advice would you give to yourself at half of your current age? Okay, so, and I just wanted to collect like tens of thousands of these and then do like a data analysis on it and see like what patterns would emerge. And I had my ideas about what they would be, so, but I wanted to see if it came through. And I thought, and I still think, I still love to do this, by the way. What advice, would there be a pattern to the types of advice that a 20-year-old would give to their 10-year-old self? I think maybe so, right? And then what would a 30-year-old give to their 15-year-old self? And I think, yeah, probably so. Like a 30-year-old, they're in their Saturn return, they're like, their whole life is upended, and they're gonna look at their 15-year-old self and they're say, don't make those goddamn mistakes, don't do this, don't do that. And then maybe a 40-year-old would, maybe more established in their adulthood, would tell their 20-year-old, don't go into that career, no, don't do that, choose this life path, or, don't get married to that person, get married to something like that. And then a 60-year-old to their 30-year-old self, you're more mature, and it might be something, maybe more, some sort of wise elder type advice. And then my thought was, and I still actually think this, because now I'm getting up into those years, when you get into a certain age, you'd answer the question and you would just say, no advice, just trust yourself and do your best. Something like that. And I'm kind of getting there right now. And it's just like, yeah, live your life, do your best, trust yourself, keep your heart open, make your mistakes. I don't have any advice to keep you from making mistakes. In fact, make your mistakes. So that's my teaching. All right, I'm going to end with this other koan, which is about, teachers, you could say. I've talked about it before, Mumonkan case 12. Zwigon calls his master. Master Zwigon called to himself every day, Master! And he answered himself, yes, sir. Be wide awake. He'd answer himself, yes, I will. Henceforward, never be deceived by others. No, I won't. What do you think? Is he crazy? He sounds crazy. Talking to himself. I'm sure he did this. We wouldn't have, he didn't make it up. He didn't make it up. He actually did this. Called out to himself. It's so eccentric. We would call this like crazy eccentric behavior right now. There's a fellow who sits outside of what was formerly Logan's coffee shop up in North Boulder, and he wears a cowboy hat and he just sings to himself. Have you seen him? Yeah, he's been doing it for years. He just sits out there and he just sings like every morning, and just sings to himself. Mm-hmm. And anybody who walks by, he's got a really good voice. Mm-hmm. He's not deceived by others. He's not listening, looking for others to tell him how to behave or what's appropriate and what isn't. It's really just encouraging himself to be awake and to just face the void in front of him and just not try to change anything, just accept everything. Right? And then what's the response? What's the response on the inside? That's not contriving. That's not manipulating. That's not trying to change anything. It's really present, really intimately present with what's arising. So the inner master, that's it. That's what we want to wake up. And that's not always the primary, in a sense you could say identity. It's not the primary subject of our consciousness. Our subjectivity is not grounded in that inner master, it's grounded in our egoic consciousness. Okay, but we can have our actual identity, our prime subjectivity, capital S subjectivity, grounded in and as our inner master, which is our Buddha nature, our awakeness. That's the inner teacher. That's you. That's the master to listen to. That's the master to listen to. Who does it look like? Look in the mirror. That's what it looks like. Okay. So make it your own. Yeah. So we have over the next month, I won't be giving talks over the next month, so you won't see me in this role as a teacher, although I will be doing Dokusan for a bunch of the time, and I'll be at Sazenkai, but you'll have a certain relationship with a formal teacher. And then we'll have a new teacher being born, being empowered in our center in a month from today. So, what's that all about? What's that all about? For you. What's the koan for you to bring alive? Yeah.